In the last few centuries, the world has witnessed major innovations and inventions stemming from humanity's backyard of ideas. We have trains, engines, cars, planes, cures for diseases, and recently, the internet. Our modern world has advanced way beyond the imaginary utopia of a medieval peasant living 500 years ago. And all of this is possible because of the scientific revolution which took 1500 onwards. And it switched our mental livers from believing in myths to evidence. However, regarding the scientific revolution as an amendment to the ways of thinking does not do any justice to its impact. The scientific revolution was also a social revolution that changed the dynamics of how we live. It divided us from the belief in God and united us to the belief in self. And among the many religions that emerged as ideologies was individualism, which changed the world forever. Throughout millennia and centuries, the basic unit of society was the family or community. Every person was dependent on their own families and communities for their needs. The doctor to treat you was in a family, the food to be eaten was prepared by the family, crops were grown by the family, work was found within the families, and sometimes even marriage was decided within families, though the result of it was never really pleasant. If a person were ever sent to the exile or disassociated from their families, they were better off dead. The head of family was, in fact, free to make immutable laws for their own family. If the women were required to stay at home, the emperor could not have any say in that. If one person murdered your cousin, it would have been completely fine for you to murder any other family member of the same person to seek revenge. Under the regime of families and dynasties, reputation and respect matter more than the petty feelings of individuals. But in the 18th century, when liberalism started gaining popularity against socialism, it also gave birth to individualism. And individualism emerged as a fuck you to family and communities and made feelings of an individual the paramount god in the society. It believed that all individuals have an inner self they need to listen to and be governed by. Now, soon enough, it went on to establish the equal value and freedom of all individuals as more important than state or community control and present to us the world we reside in today. Democratic elections, human rights, health and education services, privacy rights, decision making autonomy. Every existing system, structure, and law we have made serves the interest of none other than individuals. Individuals have sidelined the role of our actual mothers and fathers and replaced them with the market and state as our mothers and fathers. If we require anything, we can receive it from the market food, services, care, education, happiness, luxury, money, and even a spouse. Everything is there in the market. On the other hand, if we want protection and safety, we can ask the state to give us rights and justice. For this first time in history, independence has overcome interdependence. But there is a twist. The very science which was utilized by liberalists to prove the validity of spiritual religions has turned against itself to disprove the idea of the individual. So let us see how. But before we move on, if I go on to ask you, who are you, what would you say? If you are like any other sane person, you would say your name. I am this. But think about it. Are you really your name? If I say I'm Jim Gorgon, well, Jim and Gorgon are just two words made up of 9 letters in total. If I say I'm this physical structure I see in the mirror every morning, but I'm not my body, it is just a well organized flesh arranged on a skeleton. I do not refer to it as am hand, am eyes, am brain, or am body called sick this morning. I say it is my body, my hand, my brain. If I say I'm a male, that's just another way of identifying my biological features. If I say I'm my age is just a number. And the same thing applies to you as well. You are not your name, you are not your body, you are not your age, you are not your gender. If someone makes a clone of you and gives it your name, would it be you? No, right? That would be a duplicate of you, but not you. So we may even go further asking, what are you? And if you are not what you supposed you were, are you even anything? Get the answer to these mind boggling questions by buying our ebook Psychology of You for just $1 through the link in the caption. So now, let's get started. So we need a bit of a recap on the history of liberalism. So when liberalism won the race against socialism, it made individualistic desires more important than collective ambitions. And its next aim became to utilize these signs to enhance life experience of an individual. The three objectives became and still are crucial to achieving the liberal utopia where everyone feel good. Defying death, pardon, defying death, experiencing eternal bliss, and attaining divinity. This project of our so-called feeling liberalic world has already been overtaken by scientists to utilize our information on biology and technology to create something superior than ourselves, a superhuman. So in this part, I will be explaining some ongoing projects in each of these three objectives and how the world is running faster than you can ever imagine. So starting with immortality. All of religions collectively have pointed out to the importance of one thing throughout centuries, and that is death. The concept of afterlife, heaven and hell, soul, connection to God, everything has been built upon the concept of life and death. From our scriptures to the holy books, death has been portrayed as sort of a necessary event that has to happen irrespective of one's feeling. So, even though you may not believe in these spiritual religions, you must still agree with the fact that death is what gives life meaning. And without death, the life just becomes an endless process with no halt. It is the fear of death which makes or creates a sense of urgency in us. It is also knowing the fact that death has to occur, we take the risks on our own lives. However, the scientists do not give a fuck about the ethics of removing death from our equations. They do it anyway. Currently living for 1,000 years is not possible with the current technologies and is from making 80 the new 50. And this is already happening. The Blueprint project is one such ambitious project being led by Brian Johnson, which focuses on anti-aging via behavioral and biotechnological intervention. Brian is a millionaire, of course, who started this program on himself 2 years ago. Testing this on himself is incredibly courageous, and his journey till now has been really, really incredible. He's already cut down his biological age by 20 years from his current age of 45. He's also slowed pacing equivalent to 31 years and is as physically fit as top 1% of 18-year-olds. So, how did he achieve it, you may ask? Now he has this really, really complex scientific protocol which was made after they followed a series of biomarkers and tests that quantify the age of his organs, and then they designed dietary and medical protocols for decreasing cell damage and increasing the rate of reparation. But putting all the scientific jargons aside, in simple terms, Brian is aging slower than an average 10-year-old kid. And as technology and our information on anti-aging becomes even better, Brian might just become an immortal. That is a person who cannot die a natural death because he can still get killed in an accident or in a shootout. Though God forbid that. But it is not necessary that a body is to be counted in the human pursuit of immortality. The human immortality, the Human Immortality Project is one where scientists are working towards making a replica of the human consciousness and then uploading it on a computer. So literally your brains, your mind, your existence could be uploaded on a computer And that computer would have very advanced algorithms that would stimulate our cyber minds as a brain does in the body. So we'll be thinking in laptops, in our smartphones, or in the body of a monitor, and all the crazy stuff can happen here. However, what is life worth when there is no happiness? So let us move on to our second objective, that is the pursuit of happiness. So in history, happiness is rare. Happiness was rare. Hence, people accepted that happiness and pleasure was a temporary state, rather, pain was something that was eternal. When Buddha was meditating under the banyan tree for days, he came to the realization that life is suffering. In every instance, we are engaged in stress or dissatisfaction. Thus, the only way out remains to experience dissatisfaction and attain fulfillment by making life worthwhile. People agree with this even today. Temporary pleasures only turn us into addicts and zombies if indulged in excess. Even in moderation, these pleasures and happiness do not really serve a useful purpose. Sex does not bring love, alcohol does not fade problems, drugs do not bring the high of success. But scientists again do not mind proving the virtues wrong. And they are doing so in two ways: A, eliminating pain, and B, upgrading sources of pleasure. So, when it comes to eliminating pain, we already have many pharmaceutical interventions on our hands, like antidepressants, anti anxiety medications, and other chemicals in the pills, which in general stimulate our brains into producing less stress, less psychological stress, or a neurochemical known as cortisol, which is the stress hormone for the body. But that is not it. The latest scientific breakthrough is of attention helmets, developed by some biohacking companies that use electromagnetic waves or electrodes and all sort of scientific jargons to stimulate our brains to produce less anxiety and higher productivity. And of course, such helmets have already been used in China. For the workers there, it has been used for higher productivity and focus. But here in the West, a depression helmet was tested on Prey Shaw, a girl who was depressed and suicidal for years. However, when she went through the transmagnetic stimulation protocol for weeks, these were her words. Coach, I feel like there was a huge blanket that was lifted off my shoulder, and I'm completely free. Unquote. She referred to suicidal depression while saying this statement. And today, in simple terms, technology is now able to regulate our emotional states. So, trauma, stress, and pain may be a thing of the past in just a few decades. But removing pain is just the tip of the iceberg. Upgrading how we experience pleasure may be the path towards getting world class orgasms on a wish, switching our moods in an instant, or immediately getting the taste of the cheesy pizza when we want to. The lever of our future happiness lies in the hands of the scientists of today. Now, we have seen how we can use external stimulation to manipulate the inside world, our biology. But what about using the inside world to control the outside setting? Now, that is not only interesting and very, very exciting, it is also the most productive outcome that could be generated in the decades to come. And that outcome would be a superhuman. The formation of a superhuman would be the final nail to the coffin for our spiritual religions, as we would have violated the norm and become gods for ourselves. Becoming a superhuman means using technology to influence our biology in a certain way so that we procure abilities beyond the normal human. We're already altering our biological design as we use man made materials as replaceable for the naturally produced. From the bionic ears that absorb sound through a microphone near the ear to artificial pacemakers in our hearts, the robotic limbs, the recent Neuralink chips in the brains that can revive paralysis, or alterations in the blind eyes that can make them sightful again. The modern bioengineering breakthroughs are transforming us into cyborgs. And not only this, the Human Immortality Project, which was mentioned earlier, also classified can also be classified as another inorganic organism which has the mind of the human but the body of a machine. So this semi-living being may be able to hijack a software or creates its own software and cannonball it around the internet or do any sort of stuff in its laptop body. So the question that holds currently about superhumans for the future is that what would be the situation between us and superhumans? So the most accurate predictions out of this could be that the distance between the superhumans and us could be similar to the current distance between us and the chimpanzees. The divine being would be able to access states of consciousness we are not even aware of. However, this scientific utopian may also transform into a dystopian one, as we would face a world where divinity, may lie in the hands of the few richest, controlling the normal beings. But that is a story for another episode. Now, all these biological breakthroughs that we have taken a look over are meant to upgrade the liberal idea of valuing individualistic desires over anything else. But in the process of their success, the processes themselves have challenged two God values of individual itself. That is, A, you are not an individual, and B, you do not have a free will. So the biggest idea of having an inner self or a soul is proven to be equivalent to these mindless stories that the spiritual religions lecture about according to liberalism. And science is now telling us that we are not individuals but dividuals. So just like a machine, we are composed of biological organs and chemicals that generate consciousness and sense in us. We do not have any soul governing us. Everything we do, we feel, we say, and we are is just a bunch of chemicals flowing through our brains. So thus we are not much more than some data processors. The neurochemical reaction in our brains observe the data in the environment, make sense of it, and carry out a function. If it is too difficult for you to think in this way, let's take an instance. So when you see a chocolate lying on a table, your mind unconsciously reminds itself of the taste, the smell, and other information about it. Then it reminds yourself about the earlier experiences you have had eating chocolates, the good ones, the bad ones, and the bitter ones. Then after the data is processed under your belief system, and your belief system is again a bunch of neurological processes mm, carried out by the electrical impulses between neurons and a lot of complex neurological stuff going on there. Then we take a decision either to pick it up and eat the chocolate or to ignore it or whatever the hell your mind thinks of to do with it. In other words, we are not spiritual creatures as we claim ourselves to be. We are algorithmic creatures. And it is here that the concept of free will is also challenged. Because even though we perform algorithms, we are not the ones controlling them. In other words, the mind makes a fool out of itself. This became clear when Daniel Kahneman conducted a study on colonoscopy. And if you do not know what colonoscopy really is, a colonoscopy is a medical procedure where a colonoscope, which is a tube-like structure with a camera attached to it, is inserted in the anus of the patient for checking up the colon. And Daniel Kahneman conducted this research upon the patients in 1996, this experiment, and for kind of information, this procedure is very, very painful. So what Daniel Kahneman did, he divided the patients into two groups. So the first group was where the colonoscope was left inside of them for 3 minutes extra without any movement or pain. And the second group, in the second group, the colonoscope was pulled out after testing. Now there is a bit of pain involved in inserting and removing it. So when these patients were asked to rate their pain, group 1 said that they have experienced less pain, even though the colonoscope was left for 3 extra minutes. And this brings us to the conclusion that pain experience was different from the pain narrated. So patients based on, excuse me, so patients rated their pain levels based on how much the pain was there at the last or the peak moments rather than during the pain experience throughout the length of the colonoscopy. So here the length of the colonoscopy did not matter. And this is the peak end rule. It is a bias that causes us to judge our experiences based on how it felt at the peak moments compared to how it felt throughout. And that is how we end up in a world where we would re elect the government that increased taxes, created a blunder out of the economy, promoted violence. But exactly at the time when elections were about to come, they just lowered a bit of their interest rates at the end of the term, led to a bit of market growth, and immediately they got elected into the next election because the whole country forgot what they did in the last 5 years because of what happened in just a matter of weeks before the election. And test it for yourself. That is how you too rate your experience to a field trip on a countryside where you would see beautiful sceneries, beautiful villages, eat beautiful food, and when you're coming back, you just happen to open some mud pole and mud just splatters over your clothes, and suddenly the whole experience is bad. So, we are not a unified self, but a narrating self and an experiencing self at the same time. The experiencing self is the one which goes through every bit of the experience, but the narrating self only remembers the peak moments in the hindsight. So, the distinction is made even clearer when we look at the split brain experiments. So the split brain patients, if you do not know, are those patients whose two hemispheres of the brain have been cut off from each other due to some neurological disorders or complexities. And usually, in a normal human, both these hemispheres are joined together and they are required to transfer information to one another. Now, what you may not know about the human brain is that due to its unique wiring, the left hemisphere controls the right side while the right hemisphere controls the left side. But the catch here is the left hemisphere expresses itself in a logical fashion, that is through language or speech, while the right hemisphere expresses itself by creativity, that is through drawing or writing. So in this experiment that was conducted on a split brain patient named Joe, we find that hemispheres are working independently from each other. When he was shown a picture of a hammer to the right of the screen and a wood saw to the left of the screen at the same time, he was asked what he saw. So he replied with hammer. He saw a hammer because the left hemisphere, which is dominant for speech, controls the information sent from the right eye. But when he was asked to draw what he had seen, he drew a wooden saw. And this is where it gets interesting because this happened because the right hemisphere, which is dominant for drawing, controlled the vision of the left eye. So here the two hemispheres are working independently each other. But this does not stop again at this point. When Joe was asked why he drew the saw, he replied, I do not know. So the split brain experiment confirms that we are not we what we the split brain experiment confirms that we are not what we think we are. It sidelines in individualism as just a beautiful story that exists in our minds. At the end, we are not individuals with free will, but individuals who are imposters of the self. So if you like this episode of Neutrally Biased Podcast, make sure to subscribe to the Neutrally Biased channel and share this video with others so that the world can know where it is going. All the resources and the research to this article that was required in making this article has been attached to the caption below. Make sure to check it out if you want more info on these topics. And you might as well go on our website and check out our ebooks and our other blog posts which have been written earlier and which we post every week. So, this is Neutrally Biased, signing off.